Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Into the Veil. You know, there's a lot of talk about oneness, the one heart, the one mind, the law of one. We've discussed it, and I think for many people it kind of goes over their head a little bit, understandably, as we are born onto the earth with body, soul, and spirit. Our soul being very attached to the earth and our identity, our personality, our emotions. It allows us to operate and function on the earth plane. And with that, we kind of fall into the illusion of separateness. We are subject to our lizard brain and the ego and the battle between all of these things to get back to the one source that we came from. I would like for you to bear in mind stars, to think about stars. You know, stars that go supernova are responsible for creating many of the elements of the periodic table, including those that make up the human body. It is absolutely true that nearly all of the elements in the human body were made in a star, and many of these same elements have come through several supernovas. We know that the universe started about 13 or 14 billion years ago with the Big Bang, as it's called. And at that point, only the lightest elements existed: hydrogen, helium, and minuscule amounts of lithium. Elements themselves are matter that cannot be broken down into simpler substances. In the periodic table, elements are distinguished by their atomic number. This number describes the number of protons in the nuclei of its atoms. The first generation of stars formed as lumps of gas drawn together, and they eventually began to combust. This in itself causes a nuclear reaction in the center of a star. The first stars that formed after what we call the Big Bang were greater than 50 times the size of our sun. There's a process that takes place inside of the stars called nucleosynthesis, and it's basically the making of elements. The bigger the star, the faster they burn their fuel. The very first stars burned their fuel rather quickly, and they were able to only make a few elements heavier than hydrogen and helium. So when those went supernova and expelled the elements that they had produced, they seeded the next generation of stars. The age and the temperature of stars can be detected by scientists from their color. Hotter stars burn blue, while cooler and older stars burn red. The next generation of seeded stars, star babies, were then able to produce other heavier kinds of elements, such as carbon, magnesium, and really nearly every element in the periodic table. Any element in your body that is heavier than iron has traveled through at least one supernova. So it's very likely that there are a whole bunch of different stars that have contributed to the elements that we see in our own solar system, our planet, and all of the elements found within us. So let's talk about the life cycle of a star. The burning that takes place inside of stars draws on a huge amount of fuel and creates an enormous amount of energy. Stars are immense. Over 99% of the mass in our solar system is in our sun, and gravity squeezes them. Meanwhile, the burning inside of a star creates energy, which counteracts the squeeze of gravity. And this is why our sun is stable. Stars stay in this equilibrium with gravity until they finally run out of fuel. When that happens to really big stars, you can get some really spectacular supernovas. Our actual sun won't be anywhere near as dramatic as all of that when it finally burns out. When stars die and lose their mass, all of the elements that have been generated inside are swept out into space. And then the next generation of stars, the starseeds, form from those elements and from the star dust. And then they finally burn up and are swept out again, and it just recycles. This constant reprocessing of everything is called galactic chemical evolution. So every element was made in a star. And if you combine those elements in different ways, you can make different species of gas, minerals, bigger things, asteroids, planets, and then you can start to make water and other ingredients required for life, and eventually us. This process has been going on for something like 13.5 billion years, and our personal solar system is thought to have formed only 4.5 billion years ago, which is virtually, maybe even exactly, the age of our Earth. The large stars last for a few million years, while the smaller stars more than 10 billion years. You can't really watch a star form and see what happens in real time. When you look at them through a telescope, what you're seeing is probably what happened millions of years ago. You can tell certain things about their makeup based on their color, temperature, but not everything. In 1987, there was a supernova that actually made it possible for scientists to watch and record a ring of material being ejected, but this would be a very rare occurrence. The other way to study the life cycle of stars is by finding samples of cosmic dust and observing them through an electron microscope. While it's invisible to the human eye, a single speck of this very pure original stardust is only a few microns in size, 100 times smaller than the width of a human hair. We find it in the really, really pristine, primitive meteorites that were never altered on asteroids in the early solar system. It's like looking for a needle in a whole field of haystacks. Essentially, a scientist must take a tiny chip of a primitive meteorite and dissolve 99.99999% of it until they're left with a residue of silicon carbide, graphite, and nanodiamonds. Things that are made at really high temperatures in an atmosphere of stars and are resistant to acid and therefore left behind. So the question arises, are we really made of stardust? And the answer is absolutely yes. Most of the elements of our bodies were formed into stars over the course of billions of years and multiple star lifetimes. Believe it or not, it's also possible that some of our hydrogen, which roughly makes up 9.5% of our bodies, and lithium, which our bodies contain in very trace amounts, originated from the Big Bang. So let's talk about light beings, spirit energy. How you as your essential self, the part of you that belongs to Source itself, created the universe. As light beings and starseeds, we created everything on this plane of existence. And we have infused our spirit into and around all that we created, giving the object the energy to hold itself together. Even the most insignificant objects existing on this plane have a spirit to them. That spirit is in it or around them, but it's not the same as a soul. Not everything has a soul. A soul only goes into any type of being that is capable of emotion. If it's able to feel, then yes, it holds a soul specific to its level of emotional empathy. Some creatures are very, very low frequency and have a very basic experience, but they still have a soul. If you think about an ant and its experience, to us that may seem very low in the experience realm, but that ant is still sending information back to Source about all that it is experiencing, because Source is in everything, and Source is the warehouse of all experience. Instinct is a more contemplated thought, and the thought process is the dividing line between what is and what isn't soul material. Now, spirit is infused in absolutely everything. Most people would say, for example, that a lawn tractor doesn't have any spirit to it. But we would say it definitely has a spirit energy to it. It has all of the materials that have come from the earth, and everything that has matter, material, has a form of spirit to it, but not necessarily a soul. And so you would look at that lawn tractor and say it's very low energy frequency because it's very dense matter. It does have a spirit to it, and that energy transposes itself through time and all of existence, just as all energy does. That's part of why humanoids can have an out-of-body or time-traveling experience and recognize another person or building that is current within the time period. It's due to the residue or the residual energy, spirit, that has been left for time and all of eternity by that existence. You can see it, and you can experience it to some degree because of the energy content of it. This is theoretically what an apparition is. There's a residual spirit energy that exists where that entity once was. Spirit energy has a different density to it than gravity or atmosphere, different than oxygen or hydrogen. They have a different molecular structure to them, but also they have a different energy frequency and density to them. They all work in conjunction with each other, and yet they are all different. It is the spirit energy that holds all matter and energy together. It's been infused with life to continually progress and change itself. So let's think for a minute about atmospheric creations. Think about the organic matter that exists here on this plane. It works perfectly with the atmospheric conditions that exist here. The synchronicity that was developed by light beings is incredible. They designed it so that everything would progress in a perfect marriage with all of the other energy that progresses here. In its evolutionary process, its alignment coincides with the solar system, the alignment of the planets, the stars, the energy vortices, everything that exists. It all moves forward according to the atmospheric conditions of the galaxies in the universe. Because everything changes, they all work beautifully together. That is, until man alters it artificially. And then it has to fight to get back into balance, back into the rhythm of its original creative process. All energy sends out a request for that balance to take place. And that's where the conflict comes into play with humanoids destroying their own environment. Even though humans are destroying it at an incredible rate, there are other requests out in the universe that balance out the problem that humans created. Due to the fact that all of the other beings that live within this dimension need this dimension to live in, their requests are as powerful as the human requests. So all life sends out this request to balance out their universes. So the illusion of conflict, it's amazing that everything relies upon the balance of everything else to exist within this universe. It's amazing not just because of the simplicity of it all, but the fact that humans are so good at screwing everything up because of the illusion. The illusion creates the fear, and thus the conflict that exists. Humans are having inner emotional conflict within themselves because at the core of their soul remembers who they are and that they are source. We've amassed artificial information, false information about separateness. We've given in to specific religious, governmental, and societal teachings, all of which are teachings that, we're wretched creatures, that we're separate from God, that we're less than God, that we have to work our way back or we'll be punished. And humans they've separated themselves through the teachings more and more, separated themselves from the earth they were given, from nature, from what was naturally abundant to them through Source. And they've disconnected themselves from the one-on-one teaching that they're entitled to from Source. We are all a part of the I Am. And we talked about the I Am in the center of who we are. It's the statement that allows you to say to yourself that much of what we've been taught, if not all, almost all of what we've been taught is wrong. And that we shouldn't be giving in to the illusion. We know who we are. We know that we are that essential being. We know that we have that direct connection to Source. And we know that we cannot deny the totality of all of the things in our beingness. It's only when we are in the illusionary plane of demonstration that we forget that. Getting back to our inner knowing. Your knowing will tell you what is true for you based on your level of understanding. And by holding on to that knowing, you will get a little bit better, a little bit better, and a little bit better. That is the progressive process, the breakthrough. Sometimes it happens in one lifetime, one experience, and sometimes it takes many of these experiences. But that's all a part of the awakening process, the healing, if you will, of your soul's experience to the knowing of who you are and your connection to Source. Once you know, you can't be stopped unless you allow someone else to do that to you. Your spirit rejoices in the knowing and all of the new experiences you will begin having in your lifetime. Begin rejoicing in yourself. You are a light being. Welcome and enjoy your journey in it. I appreciate you being here, and I hope that you will consider your own ray of light. Consider your origins, and know, as the good book says, that He has known us since the foundation of the earth. Be blessed. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you later.